Silence can hide the truth, but only for a season. And on this night in Umuaku, destiny was done waiting.
What happens when the gods refuse to protect a lie? On this night, in the sacred grove of Umuaku, a throne would tremble, a queen would falter, and a child would stand at the center of a truth no one was ready to hear.
Before the moon set, a throne will tremble. This is episode 3.
By the time the sun climbed over the red earth hills of Umuaku, the palace courtyard was already thick with people, though no official summons had been announced. Word had traveled in the peculiar way that truth always does, without footsteps, without drums, yet faster than either. The failed ritual of the previous night had unsettled more than the chief priest's pride. It had unsettled memory. Elders arrived wrapped in heavy robes despite the growing heat, their faces set in expressions too grave for ceremony. Women clustered in hushed circles, their whispers sharp as palm fronds in harmattan wind. Even the children felt it, that sense that something vast and ancient had leaned closer to listen. At the center of it all stood King Obinnaanyị, robed in white, his staff grounded before him, his eyes darker than usual. He had not slept. He had not needed to. Whatever force had shaken the ritual chamber now demanded daylight, and so, against tradition and against the trembling advice of the chief priest, he did what no ruler had done in decades. He ordered the oracle of the ancestral grove to be consulted publicly. A collective gasp rippled outward. The oracle did not speak for spectacle. The oracle spoke when destinies cracked. The chief priest's lips tightened, but he dared not protest. The elders exchanged glances heavy with implication. If the ancestors were summoned before the people, then whatever they revealed could no longer be buried in chambers or silenced with ritual smoke. Above them all, unseen but deeply felt, the air shifted. Destiny, patient until now, had decided to speak. The path to the ancestral grove cut through dense forest that swallowed sound and distorted light. It was not a place for the unprepared. The villagers followed at a distance, allowed only to gather at its outer boundary, while the king, the queen, the chief priest, select elders and, unexpectedly, Nwanyịọma, were permitted to enter its sacred heart. That inclusion did not go unnoticed. The queen saw it and stiffened. Why her? Why now? But Obinnaanyị had insisted with a quiet authority that brooked no argument. If truth was to be revealed, then all who were bound to it must stand beneath its weight. As they walked, the silence thickened. Even the insects seemed to withdraw. The carved ancestral totems that lined the path appeared less decorative now and more watchful, their wooden eyes catching slivers of light like hidden embers. Queen Ezinenala walked with regal composure, her chin lifted, though a tremor flickered beneath her controlled breathing. The child she had presented as heir was left in the palace nursery under guard, a decision she justified as protection, but which felt to her like a fracture in certainty. Behind her, Nwanyịọma moved with steady grace, neither rushing nor shrinking, her presence calm in a way that unsettled those who noticed. The chief priest muttered prayers under his breath, but the words sounded less like invocations and more like rehearsed defenses. When they reached the grove's center, a circular clearing dominated by a towering Iroko tree, the wind returned abruptly, circling them as though testing each heartbeat. The oracle awaited. The oracle was not a figure of spectacle, but of presence, cloaked in white and earth pigments, seated upon a carved stone worn smooth by generations of judgment. Her eyes, when they opened, reflected neither age nor youth, but something far older, continuity. She did not bow, she did not greet. Instead, she pressed her palm into the soil and inhaled deeply, as though drawing memory from beneath the earth itself. The king stepped forward first, his voice steady but stripped of ornament. He said, Ancestors, if there is rot beneath my throne, reveal it. The grove fell so silent that even breath sounded intrusive. The oracle began to chant, low at first, then rising, not in volume but in density, each syllable layering upon the last like woven thread tightening into rope. The air thickened, leaves shuddered though no visible wind moved them. Then the chanting stopped, abruptly. The oracle's gaze lifted, sweeping past the king, past the elders, and landing squarely upon Queen Izinenala. Gasps fractured the stillness. The queen did not move. She would not. Her spine remained straight, her expression carved from defiance. But the oracle spoke only 4 words, and they struck like lightning splitting wood. The bloodline was altered. The grove seemed to exhale. Somewhere beyond the trees, a woman began to wail. The king's grip tightened on his staff. The chief priest stumbled backward as if pushed, and in that moment, without accusation shouted or proof displayed, destiny had named itself. The words lingered in the grove like smoke that refused to clear. The bloodline was altered. They did not echo loudly, yet they reverberated inside every chest present. Queen Izinenala did not collapse, did not scream, did not tremble as lesser women might have done under accusation. Instead, she laughed. It was not loud, but it was sharp, a blade disguised as composure. "Is this what we have become?" she asked, her voice smooth, controlled. "A kingdom ruled by riddles and fear." She stepped forward, robes whispering against sacred soil, and faced the oracle without lowering her gaze. "If there is an accusation, let it be spoken plainly, or shall we condemn queens in poetry?" The chief priest seized the moment, nodding eagerly, grasping at the queen's boldness like a drowning man at driftwood. "Yes," he said quickly, "the ancestors test us. We must interpret carefully." But the king did not look at the priest. His eyes were fixed on the oracle, waiting, and the oracle, patient as drought, lifted a calabash of water from beside her and poured it slowly onto the earth. The soil darkened, the wind returned. Then she spoke again, clearer now, heavier. "The child presented before the throne does not carry the river of Obinnaanyị's fathers." A murmur broke free from the elders like a dam giving way. The queen's laughter died in her throat. For the first time, something flickered behind her eyes. Not guilt yet, but the realization that this moment would not bend, not to her rank, not to her will. The king's command for truth did not echo twice. The oracle did not chant this time. She did not need to. When she lifted her gaze, it carried not mystery, but exposure. The throne was not deceived by exchange, it was deceived by betrayal. The words moved through the grove like a blade cutting silk. The elders leaned forward, the queen's breath shortened almost imperceptibly. And then the oracle spoke plainly, without riddle, without poetry. The child presented as heir was not of Obinnaanyị's seed. A collective gasp tore through the clearing. The chief priest staggered back as though struck by unseen force. The sacred office was defiled, the oracle continued. The one appointed to guard purity lay with the queen in secret, and together they hid their sin with ritual language. Silence collapsed into shock. This was not fear-driven substitution. It was adultery sealed in deception, sanctified by abuse of spiritual authority. The chief priest fell to his knees, not in worship, but in exposure. The queen's composure fractured at last, not in tears, but in naked realization. The king did not shout, he did not lunge. His stillness was more terrifying than fury. "You stood beside me," he said quietly to the priest. His gaze shifted to the queen. "And you shared my bed." The grove itself seemed to recoil. This was no rumor now, no whisper, no suspicion managed behind palace walls. It was truth laid bare before earth and sky alike. And in that moment, the foundation of falsehood cracked beyond repair. The grove trembled with outrage barely contained. Some elders began speaking at once, words like abomination, cleansing, judgment rising in overlapping waves. But before anger could turn towards something irreversible, the oracle lifted her staff and silence obeyed. "The child carries no sin," she said firmly, her voice cutting through fury like clear water through mud. The weight of those words settled heavily. The boy, innocent, unaware, small, stood at the edge of a storm not of his making. The king closed his eyes briefly, pain flickering across his face, not as a ruler, but as a man who had held the child, who had believed. Betrayal is one wound, misplaced love is another, but justice must not become cruelty. "Bring him forward," the king commanded, his voice calm but unwavering. The baby was carried into the grove, wide-eyed and curious, sensing the tension around him even without understanding it. Faces of elders, the queen, the priest, and Nwanyịọma blurred before his innocent gaze. The oracle knelt gracefully before him, her presence immense despite the smallness of the child. She laid her palm gently upon his soft head, and her voice resonated with certainty. "You will live, you will be nourished, you will grow strong, but you shall not bear the weight of your parents' sins." A collective sigh of relief spread through those gathered, fragile, trembling, but real. The king inhaled deeply, the tension leaving his shoulders just enough to regain his measured authority. "He will be cared for," he declared, his tone reclaiming regal command. "But the throne is not inherited through deceit, nor shall injustice be rewarded."
In that moment, the line between justice and punishment was drawn unmistakably before the people. The child would be spared. The crime of the queen and chief priest would not harm the innocent, and the kingdom witnessed the balance of mercy and righteousness laid bare. When they returned from the grove, the palace courtyard was no longer filled with curiosity, it was charged with expectation. The villagers searched their rulers' faces for answers before words were spoken, and the answers were already written there. King Obinnaanyị stepped forward, not hurried, not shaken, but transformed by revelation. Behind him walked the oracle, then the elders, then the chief priest, stripped of presence, hollow-eyed, and finally Queen Ezinela. She still carried herself upright, but something essential had been removed, not beads, not cloth, but certainty. The king raised his staff, and the murmurs dissolved into heavy silence. "The ancestors have spoken plainly," he announced, his voice steady but edged with steel. The throne was not threatened by fate, it was threatened by betrayal. The crowd stiffened. "The child presented as heir is not of my blood." A wave of shock rolled through the courtyard, but he did not stop there. The sacred office entrusted to guard our purity was defiled. The chief priest lay with the queen, and together they hid their sin beneath ritual smoke. Gasps erupted, not mild disbelief, but collective outrage. Women covered their mouths, elders lowered their heads in shame. The chief priest did not look up. The queen finally stepped forward, her voice cracking beneath the weight of exposure. "I feared disgrace," she said. "I feared being cast aside as barren." But fear had birthed treachery, and treachery had poisoned the throne. The king descended from the platform slowly and stood before her. For a long moment there was only silence between them, history collapsing into a single breath. Then, with deliberate calm, he removed the coral beads from her shoulders, not violently, not angrily, but definitively. In full view of Umuaku, Queen Ezinela ceased to be queen. The courtyard had not yet recovered from the queen's fall when a different kind of silence began to form, not of scandal, but of dawning realization. King Obinnaanyị's gaze moved across the gathered faces until he found her, Nwanyịọma. She did not step forward boldly. She did not demand to be seen. She stood as she had always, composed, dignified, carrying years of unspoken endurance in the quiet lift of her chin. And as he looked at her, something long buried began to rise. Not suspicion, not politics, memory.
The moonlit festival, the drums, the haze of palm wine thick in his veins, the laughter that had wrapped around him like soft smoke, and a face, blurred for years, haunting him in fragments, eyes that had lingered in his dreams without a name. His breath shortened, the blur cleared, the years dissolved. It was her, the maiden beneath the moon, the one night he had never been able to forget, no matter how hard he tried to dismiss it as intoxicated fantasy. A tremor of recognition passed between them, subtle, electric, undeniable. She lowered her eyes briefly, not in guilt, but in acknowledgement. She had known. Perhaps she had always known that one day truth would force memory to awaken. Then movement stirred beside her. A young boy stepped forward, steady, unafraid, unaware that history was shifting beneath his feet. The king's eyes fell upon him, and the world seemed to narrow. The resemblance was not loud. It did not shout for attention. It was quiet and unmistakable. The same firmness in the jaw, the same intensity in the gaze, the same bearing that required no training to command respect. Murmurs began to spread like wind through dry leaves. The oracle did not rush to speak. She allowed the resemblance to speak first. At last, her voice rose, firm and unclouded. The heir you have sought has not been hidden in secrecy. It has grown in the open. The words landed heavily. The king stepped closer, his heart pounding not as a ruler, but as a man confronting his own past. Memories aligned with truth. The moonlit night, the years of longing without clarity, the strange pull toward this woman who now stood before him not as servant, not as scandal, but as destiny fulfilled. "It was always you," he breathed, barely above a whisper. And as the realization settled across the courtyard, one truth became undeniable. The son born under shame was never shameful. The blood of the throne had been walking among them all along. The murmurs did not remain whispers long. What began as scattered realization swelled into collective understanding. The elders looked from the boy to the king, from the king to Nwanyịọma, and what they saw could no longer be denied. This was not a rumor, not convenience, not rebellion. It was a resemblance wrapped in timing, sealed by truth. King Obinnaanyị stood before the people, no longer clouded by doubt or memory. His voice, when it rose, carried neither hesitation nor apology. "Years ago, under the moonlight of our festival, I acted without wisdom." The admission sent a ripple through the crowd, not of scandal, but of gravity. "I did not know what that night would cost. I did not know what it would create." His eyes turned toward Chinonso. "But I know now." The boy stood steady, in a way that silenced even the most skeptical among them. The oracle stepped forward once more. "Destiny does not vanish because men forget. It waits." The elders lowered their staffs in agreement, one after the other, a symbolic acknowledgement older than memory itself. The king extended his hand toward the boy, not as a ruler claiming property, but as a father recognizing blood. "Chinonso," he said clearly so the land could hear, "you are my son." The courtyard exhaled, as though it had been holding its breath for years. Some wept openly, others knelt. The shame that had once wrapped itself around Nwanyịọma began to unravel before the same witnesses who had mocked her. And in that unfolding, the throne did not change hands violently, it simply corrected itself. What had been delayed by fear and covered by deception now stood in daylight, undeniable and unshaken. The kingdom had not lost its heir, it had only nearly overlooked him. The crowd's eyes shifted as whispers of recognition and relief settled into the courtyard. In the midst of the gathering, Nwanyịọma's parents emerged, her father's shoulders bowed under the weight of years of pride and misplaced anger, her mother's hands trembling as though very air had become heavier with remorse. They approached slowly, their voices uncertain, carrying words that were long overdue. "Daughter," her father began, his tone quivering between authority and shame, "we wronged you. We drove you to endure pain that should never have been yours to bear. We mocked you. We questioned your worth. And for this, we ask forgiveness." Her mother stepped closer, tears glinting like dew under the morning sun. "You have shown courage, resilience, and honor, the kind we never understood until now." Nwanyịọma's gaze remained calm, composed, not angered, not triumphant, but measured, regal even. She inclined her head slightly, accepting the apology without celebration, acknowledging their humility while silently demonstrating that true strength lies not in vengeance but in endurance. The boy, Chinonso, watched her with wide, understanding eyes, sensing the gravity of the reconciliation. The villagers, too, felt a stirring of conscience as they witnessed how a family, once cruel, was confronted with the magnitude of their errors. In that moment, the kingdom learnt another lesson alongside the restoration of the heir. Integrity and patience command respect even from those who once scorned it. The whispers of apology had barely faded when King Obinnaanyị raised his hand, commanding the attention of all. The courtyard fell into immediate silence, the weight of the moment pressing down like the sun at high noon. "Let it be known," the king declared, his voice steady and unwavering. "This boy, Chinonso, is my son. He is the rightful heir to this throne. The blood of our ancestors runs through him, and destiny has preserved him in the open all along." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mothers clutched their children, elders gripped their staffs, and even the village youth stared in awe at the unfolding revelation. Nwanyịọma's expression remained composed, yet there was a subtle spark of relief in her eyes, a recognition that years of endurance had led to this exact moment.
The boy stepped forward slightly, standing tall despite the throng of eyes upon him, and the king reached out, gently resting his hand on his shoulder. It was a gesture of protection, acknowledgement, and quiet pride. The people murmured among themselves, some kneeling, some bowing their heads, all silently agreeing that the true heir had been revealed and that injustice could not withstand the weight of truth. Even the queen, her face paling with the dawning reality, felt the walls of her authority crumble around her. What had been hidden in shadows was now illuminated in full, and the kingdom knew that no deception, however carefully crafted, could withstand the combined power of destiny and virtue. The silence in the courtyard thickened as all eyes turned toward the chief priest, whose confident posture now seemed brittle, almost fragile. No chants, no incense, no whispered prophecies could shield him now. The oracle stepped forward, her voice cold and unwavering, carrying the weight of generations. "You who have twisted sacred rites to satisfy your own lust and ambition have betrayed the gods themselves. You used the queen's vanity to conceal adultery. You cloaked deception with ritual, and you endangered the throne with your cowardice. Your authority is forfeit. The gods will no longer answer your call." The chief priest's knees buckled slightly, the staff in his hands trembling as though it too recoiled from him. The king, standing tall beside Nwanyịọma and Chinonso, added a voice of finality. "By the will of the ancestors and the truth you sought to bury, you are stripped of your priesthood and banished from these halls. You will no longer manipulate, no longer hide, no longer threaten the integrity of this kingdom." The elders murmured their assent, tapping staffs on the stone as if to echo judgment itself. Villagers looked on with a mixture of awe and relief, recognizing that the very source of fear and corruption had been exposed. The priest's gaze faltered, then dropped.
He would leave the palace not as a man of reverence, but as a man whose own sins had been exposed, a living testament that deception, no matter how cunning, is always revealed in time. With the queen's deceit laid bare and the chief priest banished, the courtyard transformed from a place of tension into one of solemn anticipation. Elders and villagers alike gathered closer, staff tapping rhythmically against the stone in a chorus of acknowledgement. King Obinnaanyị stepped forward, his expression composed yet tender, and took Nwanyịọma's hand, raised it slightly so that all could see. By the will of the ancestors and the truth of destiny, this woman who has endured with courage, wisdom, and unwavering integrity is to stand beside me, not as a servant, but as the one who carries honor in our land. She is to be crowned as my queen. A murmur of approval swept through the crowd, growing into a wave of cheers and applause. Chinonso, standing proudly beside them, received the formal recognition of his lineage. The oracle raised her voice, her tone carrying both blessing and prophecy. Let all who see this remember, truth cannot be silenced, virtue cannot be hidden, and destiny will always speak in its own time. The people knelt, some weeping, some exclaiming joy, as the mother and son were publicly acknowledged for the first time. Nwanyịọma's eyes met the king's, and in that glance passed years of unspoken understanding, a connection forged through endurance, recognition, and finally, love. The palace, once heavy with secrets and fear, now shone with the brilliance of justice fulfilled and hearts reconciled. As the celebration settled into the quiet hum of evening, the people of Umuaku lingered beneath the glowing moon, reflecting on the events that had upended their lives. The elders spoke softly among themselves, acknowledging that fear, deception, and ambition could topple even the highest of thrones, but that patience, courage, and truth endure beyond all schemes. Villagers who once whispered insults at Nwanyịọma now bowed in respect, understanding that integrity shines brightest when tested by cruelty and misfortune. Even the queen, humbled and banished alongside her son and the chief priest, could not escape the lesson. Power gained through lies is fragile, while honor born of suffering and virtue carries strength no deception can match. The oracle lingered by the palace gates, her eyes sweeping the lands that would remember this day for generations, a reminder that destiny is not taken by force, but revealed in time, and that those who protect it, like Nwanyịọma and her son, are the true heirs of history. The king stood silently beside Nwanyịọma and Chinonso, feeling the weight and wonder of what had been restored, love, justice, and the rightful order of things. And as the moonlight bathed the palace in silver, the people of Umuaku understood that though silence may hide truths for a season, destiny has a way of speaking, of asserting itself, and of demanding that the righteous inherit their place in the world. And so concludes the epic tale of Nwanyịọma, the maiden who endured, Chinonso, the rightful heir, and King Obinnaanyị, the ruler who remembered. A story of courage, patience, and the unyielding power of truth that has echoed through the lands of Umuaku. We hope you felt the tension, the revelations, and the triumph as the kingdom witnessed justice, honor, and destiny fulfilled. From the shadows of deceit to the light of truth, every moment carried the weight of generations, and now it has been shared with you. Thank you for watching this incredible journey. If you enjoyed this story, like this video to show your support. Share it with friends and family who love epic African tales, and subscribe to the channel to continue exploring rich folk tales, legends, and stories that celebrate our heritage. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an adventure, a revelation, or a story that moves the heart and mind. This is the end of the Umuaku Saga episodes, but the stories live on, and your journey through African legends continues here with us. Until the next story, may courage guide you, truth empower you, and destiny find you ready.